Hello, welcome to Holistically Speaking. I'm your host, Morala DeVoe. Today we have a little bit of a different show. It's different in a couple of ways. My guest today is actually joining us over the phone from Long Island. I'll introduce you to her in a minute. And it's also a little different because she's going to be sharing more of her personal story. She's also a practitioner, an alternative health practitioner, but she's going to be speaking mostly from her own perspective, and I'm hoping that I know it will be very inspiring for you and that you might connect with her story in a special way. If you've been joining us this month, we've been focusing on cancer and different perspectives on cancer. And so my guest today, as you can see her in the other half of the screen, is Christine Egan. Welcome, Christine.
Good morning.
Good morning and good afternoon. We air at different times. Good afternoon and good evening. We air at a bunch of different times during the week. Thank you so much for joining us, Christine, and just being willing to do this kind of creative show. Our viewers will have a chance to also see your book cover. It'll pop up from time to time. And so, Christine, I was really excited to have you on the show because you obviously have a personal story with cancer, and we called the show today A Healthy Girl's Guide to Breast Cancer, which is the title of your book, right?
Yes, it is, which kind of describes me and my journey, which was I am this healthy person who was leading this extremely healthy lifestyle and somehow was diagnosed with breast cancer.
Yeah.
And that's what the whole book is about.
Yeah. And I can imagine the shocking moment of saying, wait, how could this be happening to me?
Yes, definitely. I am, like you said, I am a health counselor. I'm a holistic health coach. And I did have a really big background in nutrition for probably 20 plus years. Mm-hmm. We were growing our own food. I was doing my yoga. I was exercising. Two of my kids were born at home. So we led this very healthy, crunchy granola lifestyle. And I thought for sure, out of all the group of my friends, that I was not going to be the one that was diagnosed with breast cancer.
Right.
And then I was.
Yeah, because you were already a health coach, right? By the time.
Yes. I was.
So you were a health coach, you were living the incredible lifestyle where we all would be feeling that we're doing everything we can to prevent this thing from happening, and here it happens, right?
Yes, that's exactly it.
So I was actually reading through your book a little bit this morning, and one of the things that I have to say to our viewers, and I'll probably repeat it later in the show in case somebody joins us later on, is that from your book is one of those, so you're a gifted writer, because your book is one of those that when you start the first sentence, it just totally hooks you in. And I found myself, like 6 or 7 pages later, like, wow, I just want to keep on reading. So it's a really delicious read. And one of the first things that caught me and drew me in is the story of how you first suspected you had breast cancer. Can you share that story, because it is really moving?
Sure. Well, it started out with me just going to my regular OBGYN right around my birthday every year. I would go for my yearly checkup, and I had just been with my OBGYN, who is a friend of mine. He was with me, even though I used the midwife, he was with me when I was pregnant with my 3 kids. And I went for my yearly checkup. He did a regular breast exam, all clear. As I leave the office, he handed me my prescription for a mammogram and an ultrasound.
Yeah.
It was like a 5-year follow-up for me to start getting my, tests done yearly.
Yeah.
And it was right around November, and I thought, okay, well, after the holidays, I'm going to go and make this appointment at the radiologist's office. And somewhere in November, December, before the holidays hit, I was laying down on the couch in a position that I never, ever lay down. I never lay down lengthwise on the couch with my arms up and my legs were, all across the couch, and my head was up on a pillow. Mm-hmm. And my little dog, at about 15 pounds, climbed on top of me, and she started pawing at my left breast.
Pawing it?
Like pawing, like she was digging at something. like as if she was outside digging in the ground or digging sand.
Yeah.
And it was enough for me to, I pushed her off, but it was like one of those internal alarms that went off. It was like, well, what the heck was she touching?
Right.
And just as I was pushing her off, I kind of just felt around my breast, and I felt a little lump.
Yeah.
But the lump still really didn't go off. Like, I knew that's kind of odd that there's this little lump there, and it felt like a little BB, like a little BB bullet.
Like a BB bullet, yeah.
It was reminiscent of of when I breastfed my kids, of a clogged milk duct.
Yeah.
And my kids were much older at that point, so no, I wasn't breastfeeding a child. So it was one of those things that was like, okay, that's interesting. And on the other hand, I wasn't overly alarmed.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it's incredible that your dog, isn't it wonderful just to realize the incredible intuition of our pets and how they're connected, that she did this thing that she had never done before and got you paying attention.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's both. It was Zoe the dog, and it was me paying attention to my own intuition, saying,
Right.
I need to figure out what it was that she was just touching on me.
Yeah.
Instead of just pushing her off of me.
Exactly, that you listened. So obviously one of the reasons why I was very eager to have you on the show was not only because you're a success story, but because you also, I don't want to kind of give up the punchline, but you also essentially brought your own way of treating your cancer. Like you kind of commanded your own ship. That's at least my impression. So can you tell us about your choice in how you went about your cancer diagnosis and what decisions you made?
Well, the funny part was, is as I was going through it, none of it seemed like anything was groundbreaking to me. Like, I just felt like I was doing something that everybody was doing until I realized it wasn't. I interviewed 6 doctors before I settled on a surgeon. I didn't realize that not everybody did that.
Exactly.
Like, I wanted to be sure that the doctor that I was with was someone that I trusted,
Yeah.
someone that I can relate to, and someone that when they spoke, I could listen to what they had to say and yet still make my own decision as to what the next steps were.
Exactly.
So I think that part was unique in really
Yeah.
taking the time and the energy to find the right doctor for me.
Yeah. And if I can interject for a moment, we had a guest last weekend. We had Dr. Bill Warnock, who's a naturopath in town, and he has had a lot of patients come through his practice with cancer and looking for his support. And that was the very first thing that he said. He said, you have to go talk to a bunch of different doctors, get different opinions, and you need to make your own decisions. And he said that's the very first step, is that people need to feel empowered that they are the ones who are making the decisions. So you're essentially echoing that was you. You just kind of took that on your own.
I'm echoing that 100%. And then I'm going to throw in a little tidbit.
Yeah.
My tidbit to that is, if you're seeing a doctor and all they know is breast cancer, okay, and that's all they do is surgically remove breast cancer from women's breasts all day long. Obviously, you're going to them for their expertise, but you're not going to them to ask them alternative health kind of questions, because that goes beyond their realm of their expertise.
Right.
So, although I love my breast surgeon and she is a friend of mine and I trust what she has to say to me, I also know and respect her boundaries, so that if she says to me, I can't recommend that you do an alternative type of chemotherapy treatment, that I understand where she's coming from.
Right.
She's coming from a point of, she only knows traditional treatment, so therefore she's not going to go out on the line and say to me, yeah, I think you should try that, because, who knows, it might work.
Exactly.
So it comes on, you need to understand when you are meeting with doctors that they only come from a place of their own expertise, which is
Right.
great. But if you need to take what they say with a grain of salt and then decide.
Exactly. Yeah, because they are going to, as you exactly stated, they are speaking from their area of expertise and from what they know, and they're telling you their best recommendations from what they know, but different practitioners will have a completely different approach. So that's great that you're mentioning that. So tell us about your choices in treatment. What did you feel was right for you?
So I decided to go ahead and surgically remove my cancerous mass and had a lumpectomy, which meant they literally went in, cut a section of my breast, removed the cancer, and removed the surrounding tissue around it to be sure that I had what are called clear margins.
Yeah.
And that surgery, the one that I decided to do, see, this is one of the things I'm talking about. One of the breast surgeons that I decided to go with did something a little bit beyond what I felt comfortable doing, which was she took out lymph nodes at the time of surgery. Not all surgeons do that. I wasn't 100%, gung-ho on that aspect of the surgery, but I liked the surgeon so much and what she was about that I was willing to let that part slide so that I could still use her as a surgeon.
Right.
So that was part of the treatment, and I was led to believe that because my cancer was caught so early, that nothing was going to happen. All I had to do was do the lumpectomy and then follow up with radiation.
Yeah.
And when I was told that by the 6 doctors that I visited prior to the surgery, I felt like, okay, I can do this. I can put my head down and do what needs to be done. But when they went into the surgery, part of my cancer did spread to my lymph nodes, and that was a game changer. Everything that we had thought and planned went out the window, and I was now forced with more information and a little bit more difficult diagnosis to figure out what my next steps were.
Right. So you came out of surgery with a little bit of, or with an awareness of somewhat of a more serious or situation than you thought you were going into surgery with.
Yes, that's exactly it. And from then, I sat down with a traditional oncologist after my test results came in, and he automatically, recommended that I do traditional chemotherapy because I was so young, because I was a mother of 3 children. It was like automatic, like, of course you're going to do chemotherapy. There's no ifs, ands, buts about it. And I did push at that point to do a test, what's called oncotype testing. And he was all along for that and pushed my insurance company to pay for this specialized testing, which tested the actual cancer, the actual tumor that was in my body, and they predict the likelihood of the cancer coming back. And the percentage of the cancer coming back in my body was relatively low. And I was willing to take those odds that there's a chance that this cancer is not going to come back. I really could not wrap my head around doing traditional chemotherapy for myself.
Yeah.
And part of that reason was I was really coming from a place of health.
Yeah.
I was this healthy person. I led this healthy lifestyle. I can continue to lead this healthy lifestyle and take it up a few notches if need be. And I could not wrap my head around doing traditional chemotherapy, which what led me to investigate alternative cancer treatments. And that's when I was able to find the insulin-potentiated therapy, the IPT treatment.
Yeah. And that's what you went with?
That is what I went with. So I found a doctor who was about an hour and 20 minutes away from my house, and my husband and I went to go meet with him, and I wasn't quite sure what I was expecting when I got there, but it was a very traditional doctor's office, and I met with Dr. Lynchett, and I met with him expecting him to tell me that I did not need the IPT treatments.
Oh.
I really thought that because I was so healthy and because I could, promise to stay on that healthy path, that he was going to tell me Yeah, there's really no need for you to go ahead with these treatments.
Right.
And when he started talking to me about doing the treatments, it was the first time that I really, really lost it. Like, I just sat in his office bawling and just sat in front of that tissue box, just crying hysterical as he was giving me the details of how the treatment worked. And when I left that office, my husband turned to me and he was like, I'm so sorry. What was going on there? And I said, I really thought he was going to say I was exempt from it. And my husband Frank turned to me and he said, oh, I wish I had known that that's what was going on in your head, because I would have told you beforehand that that's not what was going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. And it probably almost became more real to you in that moment. Where
it became very real because I now have a traditional doctor telling me to do the chemo, and I had this alternative doctor telling me, yeah, you need to do something.
Yeah.
You may be young and you may be healthy, but there is still something going on in your body. So let's do something preventatively at this point to be sure that the cancer doesn't come back.
Right. Right. So you went for the IPT, which is. Can you describe that a little bit? How is that different from conventional chemotherapy, just so our viewers can hear from your experience why you made that choice?
Well, the basis of the IPT treatment is that it's a low-dose chemotherapy.
Mm-hmm.
And how it works is the therapy uses insulin and takes advantage of the powerful cell-killing effects of ordinary chemotherapy used, but on a very low dose.
Mm-hmm.
So how it would work was I would go in fasting, and they would, the nurses there would give me a shot of insulin and wait for my blood sugar level to dip into what's known as therapeutic levels. And for every single person, their therapeutic level is different. For mine, we waited for my blood sugar levels to get into the 40s. And I know to most people, anybody in the health field would look at you and be like, "Oh my God, what are you talking about?" That's like you could go into shock. Yes, you can, but there is a nurse that is literally by your side, ready to take care of you if need be an emergency situation.
Right.
And at that point, then they would inject the chemotherapy drugs, and I took 3 separate chemotherapy drugs. And that would be pushed in during that time in the therapeutic level. And then once all the drugs were put in, then I would eat and we'd bring my sugar levels back up to normal.
Gotcha. So this half hour sometimes goes really fast, and we have about another 10 minutes left. So I want to shift gears a little bit and hear about, obviously your choice of chemo is already kind of an alternative approach. It isn't necessarily the traditional most commonly used chemotherapy approach. So, but you also obviously introduced or incorporated into your own healing your experience with food, and I would love to hear what were some of the choices that you made in that regard.
So the big things were, it started straight from surgery, just automatically eating and drinking a lot more water, being very mindful of rest, pre-surgery and post-surgery. It was drinking detox teas to get any of that anesthesia or pain meds that I used, for the treatment. It was doing Reiki during that time to help my energy. It was keeping up with high-quality organic greens to help my energy level, help my thought process, help me detoxify any of the medications that were going into my body.
Yeah. So I'm just going to recap. You said water, increasing your amounts of water, being mindful about your sleep. You did Reiki, detox tea to help your body eliminate the anesthesia. Did you keep on with the detox tea? Were you looking at quickly detoxifying from the chemo once you received it? Was that something that you...
So every time, I had 14 chemotherapy treatments, And after every chemotherapy treatment, you're there for about 6 hours.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Before they give you all the pre-meds, before they actually do the treatment, and then the post-treatment to make sure that everything's okay. Because I did IV vitamin C drips. So that was like a 6-hour day. And then I would come home, I would rest for a little bit, and then I would do a hot yoga class.
Mm-hmm.
So that it would help me detox even more of that, the medication that was put inside me.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a great opportunity to, move around and detoxify my body.
Yeah. So the yoga for detoxification and also for, I'm sure, movement and in keeping your nervous system in optimal shape. And I love that you mentioned Reiki. So how do you feel the Reiki helped you in your process?
Well, when I came back from surgery, I felt my breast felt like I did after my children were born, except one breast was ginormous and one breast was normal size.
Yeah.
So my one breast that I had the surgery on was so swelled up, from everything that had just been done. So I really tried to embrace that voluptuousness instead of being like, oh my God, look at this breast. I look abnormal. It's ginormous. The other side is, regular, and here's this big bruised one.
Yeah.
So I really tried to change my mindset post-surgery. And in keeping with that, I did the Reiki that helped my mindset, clear my mind, get the energy moving within my body.
Right.
It just helped on other levels that I might not have been able to verbalize at the time.
Right. And what you've brought up in a variety of your choices, you're echoing what some of our practitioners have said. We had Chinese medicine practitioner talk about the level of fear that people feel when all of a sudden you get this diagnosis, and it feels so scary, and that actually puts you in the opposite place, from a nervous system perspective, that you want to be for healing. You want to be in the most relaxed state possible. So the fact that you're being mindful of your rest and doing Reiki and yoga, these aren't necessarily things that one would think of as essential in your cancer treatment, but they absolutely are, and I'm sure that you believe they were a huge cornerstone, right?
I think the rest was number one, and it's such a controversial thing, the whole rest part, and it strikes a chord in a lot of people, this whole idea of resting, and I mean resting pre-surgery, post-surgery, after treatment, before treatment.
Yeah.
You need your body to heal. And how is your body going to heal? It's going to heal in rest mode.
Yeah.
And I was 100% committed to healing. And I would do whatever it took to heal. And I knew that resting was a huge part of my, healing process.
Yeah. Wonderful. So I want to touch on food a little bit because I'm curious to see if there was anything in particular that spoke to you. Some people go with like a Max Gerson approach to diets in cancer treatment where it's all vegan. Other people say, no, you need to eat a ketogenic diet where it's no starch, no sugar, no carbohydrate, lots of vegetables and even fats. Was there anything like that you followed?
I think I did change a lot of my diet, and I have upgraded it. I mean, I thought I ate healthy before, and I was eating healthy before. So let's say I had 1 or 2 juices a week and a smoothie here and there. Now I have a juice a day, I have a smoothie a day, and I eat as much whole, real food as I can. And I avoid sugar. So I'd like to say that the huge dietary changes were really upgrading my juices, my smoothies, and avoiding sugar.
Yeah.
I go through phases like regular people where, if I'm at a party and there's a beautiful cake that's in front of me, I'd like to be able to take a bite of that cake and know that having a bite of that wedding cake is not going to cause me to have cancer. I try to live as best I can in a real life setting.
In a
and
normal
to me,
way.
that means eating whole food and
Right.
eating as high quality foods as I can.
Right. So I want to show people, we have a few more minutes, but before we wrap up, I want to show people the resources page where they can find your book, and the website is christineegan.net, and also the Healthy Girls Guide to Breast Cancer.com, which is the title of your book, The Healthy Girls Guide to Breast Cancer. So can you tell us a little bit about what people would find by reading your book? What was your purpose in writing this book? And
well, the book started out really as just an opportunity for me to write down my feelings of what was going on during my time with cancer. And my original intent was just to print out a couple of copies for my family and a couple of friends. And it kind of snowballed from there when I wound up with an editor who said, "You really have something here." And I was like, "Really?" She's like, "Yeah, not everybody interviews 6 doctors before they find them. And not everybody, upgrades their diet." And I was like, "Oh, okay." Yeah. And it just kind of went from there as to making it a part memoir, part guide of how to go about beating cancer on a very positive way, an empowering way. And then the whole guide section is about, great whole foods and how to incorporate them into your diet.
Right. And what I loved about just going through your book quickly this morning was a couple of things, and I just felt this is definitely a book that any woman diagnosed with breast cancer would want to read. One of the reasons was, as I mentioned, that I really wanted to highlight, the very first thing you said was the fact that you were your own decision maker. You were driving the ship, and that's really not common. People will just go to one doctor and do what the doctor says, and you were just, like you said, you talked to 6 different doctors. So that was something that was obvious to me. The other piece that stood out for me in reading bits of your story was listening to your awareness. I happened on the section, I fell, perusing through some pages, I saw the moment where you got to your chemotherapy appointment, and then you sat there, and then something was not feeling right, and you said, "You know what, I'm not going to get my chemotherapy today," and you went home. And then you sat a whole week just listening to your intuition and listening to your body and just trusting that you were getting, I'm sure, the support and the guidance that you needed, but that you were also following what was right for you. Is that fair?
Yes, that's exactly it. Was that here I was. I thought I was supposed to be doing this chemotherapy. I thought that this was the way I was supposed to be. I was led to Dr. Lynch's and do this whole IPT treatment. And then at treatment number 2, we ran into some problems. Yeah. And there was a whole problem with my port, the way that they actually inject the medicine into my body, which was through the port in my chest, rather than an IV in my arm. And there was a problem with my port. And instead of, when we got there, I could see that there was already a problem with the nurses. There was a problem with them accessing my port. And I could feel this fear welling up in me beyond anything that I had been feeling. And it was time. I looked at my husband, and we both looked at each other and said, "You know what? It's time to go." It was time to leave that situation, get home, get to a safe place, and just chill and relax. And when I feel like I'm ready to do it again and get back, then I will. And that's what it took. It took us about 5 days. And the doctor called me and was like, "How are you doing?" I said, "Okay, are you ready to come back?" "No, not yet, but I'll be there soon." And within a matter of a few days, that appointment was back on the schedule. And I was like, "Okay, now I'm ready to commit to the rest of the treatment."
Thank you so much, Christine. We've run out of time, but thank you again for joining us, and people, I'm sure, will find great benefit from your book. Thank you.
Thank you.